Okay, well, we'll make a start. What we're going to be covering today, number of things. Firstly, I'm going to kick off by giving you sort of a vision of what AI assisted assessment could look like. Why do I think this is a good idea? What are the potential benefits? I'm going to do a quick overview of the TeacherMatic assessment tools for any of you who are not fully familiar with the tools that we've developed for doing this. And then I'm going to be talking about what I would be doing if I was still in my previous role as a learning technology director at a large college, Hertfordshire College, that delivered further and higher education. And this sort of webinar really came from. I did a couple of slides from this at a previous webinar. Esam, if you could pop the link into the webinar. It's a webinar we did with GISC and some of the participants in the GISC AI assessment pilot last month. And I had a couple of slides on what I would do if I was still in charge of learning technologies. And a lot of people emailed me or asked questions in the session, and it struck us that doing a wider session on this particular thing would be a good idea. So I'll be speaking about that, and then I'll be handing over to my colleague Esam, and we'll be talking about the SAFE framework, which is a framework that we've developed that will help guide you through this whole process. And then finally, handing over to Hannah, we'll be talking about the GISC pilots that TeacherMatic has been involved with for the last 3 years and how you can purchase TeacherMatic licenses via GISC. Okay, so firstly, a vision for AI assisted assessment and feedback. And this first image, as you probably realize, an AI generated image, is very much what we don't want to do. And when we first started at TeacherMatic thinking about building some AI assessment tools, and something that my colleague Esam does delight in, he did have to work hard to persuade us this was a good idea, because I was very worried about this situation where we clearly have a lot of issues with students using too much AI to create assignments. One of the most common questions we get is that. And if we then have AI marking assignments, we could just have a situation where we've got AI grading AI. And there's no human brain involved anywhere along the chain. And clearly that's something that we want to avoid. Having sort of worked on this now for a good while, and having been doing a pilot with GISC and 15 universities and colleges and other post-16 learning providers, it's become very clear that this sort of nightmare scenario can be avoided, but you do have to put in a fair amount of things in order to avoid this actually happening. So this picture is more what we're hoping to achieve, where the scary robot is sitting alongside the academic, the teacher, and is helping them and supporting them with the assessment and feedback process. So what will good practice look like? There are just a few things that I think that we should be moving towards and aiming to do with assessments is, as much as possible, finding ways to AI-proof assignments. So to create things perhaps based on real-life scenarios. There's a number of things you can be doing here to make it difficult for students to write their assignments just using AI. Critical to avoiding this is the human in the loop. And that is very much how the TeacherMatic assessment tools are designed to work. That it's not just the AI grading the student work, but it's the human plus AI. Good practice should also be transparent, accessible, and fair. That we should be very open with students what we are doing with AI and why we're doing it. It should be very secure. The students should feel very secure that when we are uploading their work onto an AI platform, it's not going anywhere, it's not going to leak out, it's not feeding in a large language models, etc. a real concern to me is that, in the future, we should be making sure, as we've always done, that we are assessing students' understanding, their knowledge, their skills, and not just their ability to use AI to write an assignment. Now, I put just in there because I think it's important we do encourage students to use AI responsibly. That when they go into the world of work, having good AI skills is going to be something that's going to be very helpful to them and could help, with them with their careers. But we want to make sure if they are using AI in their assessments at all, it's very much alongside and that very much the human is in the loop with what the student is doing as well. I think over time we are going to have to move to more alternative assessment methods. Moving away. Is the essay dead? Because essays can so easily be written, completely with AI. And I think we need to think about, how we do higher stake assessments to make sure that those are AI proof. And, we can think about things like, future doctors. We don't want people who qualify with a medical degree where most of that has been because they've created all their work using AI and they don't really understand medicine as well as they might have done 10 years ago. I don't want an electrician coming around my house in a few years' time who passed all their BTEC electrical engineering coursework by submitting AI created assignments. We need to know that we are truly testing students' understanding in this world where we can use AI. And so, the old traditional exam still has to have its place where we can see that people are, doing their work without any computer assistance. And something that we are looking at in TeacherMatic is a way of creating a short Viva questions, so sets of questions for teachers to give students after they've submitted assignments so that they can check that it is genuinely their work. So those are just some thoughts on what good practice will look like. Why should we be doing this? What are the reasons why we are to be looking at using AI to help support with assessments? I think, but perhaps the main reason is the burden that assessment, gives. It's hard work, and myself and Esam, we're both ex-teachers. We both remember well spending a lot of our weekends marking students' work when we'd much rather be doing other things. And class sizes are only increasing. In universities, we're seeing group sizes are growing, quite dramatically. And in the GIST pilot, we've got people with class size of 200 or 300. So the assessment burden there is absolutely massive. So in order to look after the well-being of academic staff, of teachers, in order that we can still recruit teachers, which is a major challenge, and retain them, that if we can look at ways to ease that burden of assessment, that's going to be a useful thing to do. There certainly is evidence, that coming out of the GIST pilot that we are doing with a number of organisations, that it does lead to reliable and accurate grading. Certainly it has the potential to reduce bias. So particularly if you've got assessments that are not anonymous, there's an awful lot of research out there that shows that teachers can have both conscious and unconscious biases about particular students. And if you've got AI being involved in the grading of work, the AI won't have those, they won't not like Johnny because he's a pain in the backside in class, or feel sorry for another student and perhaps mark them a little bit more leniently because they're aware they've got a challenging life outside the university. Another thing that, we don't like to be too open about of our learners, but anyone who's done a lot of feedback and assessment will know about, is that if you're marking 50, 100 assignments on a Sunday afternoon, you get fatigue. Do you mark that 80th assignment as well as you did the first one? Your brain is fried. And so, again, the AI can be supportive there. If you're putting these assignments through AI and that's doing some grading work for you, that can act as a check and a balance to make sure that if fatigue is kicking in, the AI is supporting it and hopefully will reduce that fatigue. And finally, another good reason, and I remember how frustrated I would get as a student many years ago with lecturers who were slow on returning work, is that it does enable us to return work quicker to students that's being submitted, and with often much more detailed assessments and feedback. Okay, so I'm just going to do a very quick overview of some of the TeacherMatic tools. And so, if any of you don't know, this is, hopefully many of you will be familiar with, this is what TeacherMatic looks like when you log on. We've got 150 different generators for doing a whole range of planning, delivery, and assessment tools. So the assessment tools are just a small part of what TeacherMatic offers. Esam, if you could post the link to a video, we've got a video demonstration of the advanced feedback tool that you can look at in more detail later on. But I'm just going to give you a quick overview of that tool and some of the other assessment tools that we've got in TeacherMatic. And so to use any of the tools in TeacherMatic, so if I want to use the advanced feedback tool, which is our main tool for grading and writing feedback on student work, you click on the Use button, and with all of our tools, you then get some things that you need to complete. So when you want to start setting an assignment with advanced feedback, you click on Add Assignment, and then you can put in all the details of the assignment that you want to do. And here what you see, these are where I've marked a number of different assignments. So for this particular one, you see I've marked 15 assignments on a social justice topic. So let me just go through some of the key screens. So when you set up an assignment in TeacherMatic, you give the title, you give the assignment brief, say the kind of feedback that you want to achieve, that it's formative. You can either select a grading scale, and in this case, I've selected a percentage grading scale, or you can say that you want to mark it via a marking rubric, etc., and it will then do that. And importantly, you give it a level. And we've got the region here, so if you're in Scotland, you've got the Scottish level, and we can look at different international options there as well. Excuse me. So you create the assignment in TeacherMatic, so it knows what the assignment is about. And then once you've done that, you submit some assignments to TeacherMatic. And this is the kind of feedback that then TeacherMatic writes. So for this is a ethics in psychological research essay where I've uploaded 3 essays. What I've actually done here is I've uploaded 3 essays twice. So you can see 6 uploads here. And for each one, you can view, it generates very detailed feedback. So it's broken down the essay into different components, given a percentage score on each one. And here it's given an overall grade of 66%. Now this here is actually that same essay where I upgraded it a second time. And you see here it's graded at 68%. And this is one of the things that I'm really pleased about with TeacherMatic, is that if you upload the same piece of work on different days at different times, it does tend to give, as you would hope, very similar grades. And if you look at the summary submission, your essay demonstrates a solid understanding of ethical principles in psychological research, blah, blah, blah. Get a similar bit of feedback there, but then the next sentence is somewhat different, focusing on slightly different things. So it's not just replicating exactly the same feedback, but the feedback, as you would hope, is very similar. What TeacherMatic also does is it will annotate the student work. Now, so this is the actual student essay, and if I click on the highlighted parts of it, this is some annotations that the TeacherMatic has written on that work. And the assessor can then go in, and this is where we've got the human in the loop, and can add further comments. And they can do things like change the color. So if you want to distinguish between AI generated comments And human-generated comments, you can do that easily by changing the color options. Okay, so if I close that, you see that for each of the essays, you can view the feedback and you can view the annotated PDF, and then you can download them all at the end. We've also created a similar tool, FE people here will be interested in this, that is designed for the BTEC style of assessment. So similar interface where you give TeacherMatic the information about the assessment, the unit specification, the assignment brief, etc. But it then grades the work using the BTEC approach. So where it looks at the P1s, the P2s, the M1s, has these been achieved as yet or not achieved, and writes detailed feedback on why they have or why they haven't been achieved. And this particular part of the table is exactly the required table style that you need for when you're returning the BTEC work to students. So that's an additional tool that we built with our FE colleagues in mind. And again, that particular one does the annotated feedback on the student assignment. A couple more tools that we've got. This is our comparative assessment tools. And here you can upload a number of assignments, and it sort of looks at each assignment and looks at what the strengths and weaknesses. So I've uploaded 3 assignments here. It said these are the strengths of these 3 assignments. These are the areas that they could be improved. What went well, writing style. So it's comparing the assignments next to each other and then pulling out some key things, and particularly this last section, it's kind of identifying, are there some common areas where perhaps all the students don't, require some additional input. And so it's giving that teacher some feedback on what they may need to cover in a bit more detail at a later date. We've also, working with University of Chester, they recently developed a marking standardisation feedback tool. And so this is designed to support where you've got a group of teachers working together, a standardisation committee maybe for a course. And what this does is you can upload some student work and it simulates 3 different teachers, a strict specialist, a holistic educator, and a literalist, and looks at how they would all grade that same piece of work. So you see in this case, this one gives a grade of 66, this one a slightly high grade of 69, and this one a grade of 67. And this was that same essay I showed you early on at the TeacherMatic tool graded, I think it was 66 and 68, and you see it's graded again 68, which does demonstrate how reliable this kind of AI assessment approach can be. Right, so back to my presentation. What would I have done as a learning technology director? So just a bit of background for those of you that don't know me. I've worked in further and higher education since 1986. I'm a proper old-timer. And my last significant, I've worked at GISC for a number of years, but my last significant role was ILT director at Hertfordshire College, which I did for about 14 years. And so if I was still in that job now, I would be looking at implementing AI in assessment. So what I've done here is a kind of a mental exercise. If I was still doing that job and not the MD for TeacherMatic, what would I be doing at the moment? So this is just some, suggestions that you might find useful if you're looking to do things that you might follow. And we will share this PowerPoint at the end, when we send out some details in a few days' time. So you will get this. So the first thing I would do is I put together a working group to oversee the implementation. And I think it's really important that a number of different voices are in that. I think it's key that you've got whoever the senior leader in the organisation is who has responsibility for assessment. It's important that they're a part of that group. And then other people I think I would want there are IT manager, the manager responsible for data protection and security, one or two curriculum or departmental managers, quality manager, student service manager to represent the student voice, some academics and or teachers, and also some actual student representation, maybe someone from the student union or student guild or uh, class representations, whatever would be appropriate. So the student voice is on that overseeing working group that's looking at over the project. I think it's important that you do a pilot, and so plan a pilot carefully, think about what groups you would want to use for a pilot, define the aims of your pilot, how long are you going to want to run that pilot. I would suggest that, at least a term. And then what sorts of assessments do you want to include in the pilot? Now, I know that some of you are probably wanting to get started maybe across the whole college or university in the new academic year. So if you're wanting to do this, you might want to look at, there might not be a lot more assessments to be done this academic year. So perhaps looking at historical assessments, but I don't mean, history degree or history A level, but ones that you've already got. And there's no reasons you can't do a pilot to some degree using your legacy assessments and putting those through AI tools and seeing how they compare in the grading and feedback to what the AI tools produce. Think about whether you want to do this for formative assessment, summative assessment, or a mix. My own advice initially would be focus on formative, but no harm in perhaps putting your toes in the water with some summative assessments, and think how you're going to evaluate this pilot. What success going to look like? How you're going to measure that? What is it you want to find out? Look at your organisation's current strategies and policies that might apply to teaching, learning, and assessment, and do a review to see if any of them need updating in any ways, and look at, do you actually require any new strategies and policies? Do a quick check around different rules and regulations that would apply here. So in particular, there is guidance out there from the Department for Education. Different regulators will have their own guidance, who might regulate, courses on nursing and midwifery, British Psychological Society, these kind of organisations. Look at the awarding bodies if you are delivering any courses from external awarding bodies, what their guidance tends to be. Look at what Ofsted, Ofqual offers to students. In general, there seems to be a consensus that AI assessment is okay, it can be used, but it must involve the human in the loop. That seems to be the emerging consensus out there, but you do need to check for any particular courses and qualifications that you're running, that there aren't any particular quirks and that you are covered and okay doing this. You need to think about what the procedures are, how this is actually going to work, that, what technologies and integrations you'll be using. Very much hope that you will be using TeacherMatic, but there are other tools out there. How's it going to work? Who's going to do what? Who's going to be involved in each stage in the assessment? How will you ensure the human in the loop? Given that the emerging consensus is that you can use AI-assisted assessment, feedback, grading, but the human must be in the loop. The teacher must be involved. They must sign this off, say, yes, I agree with this grade in some way. So how will you ensure that? And so I think we will be doing in TeacherMatic in an upcoming version of our feedback tools is a kind of a tick box where teachers will agree that they do agree and they do support the grades that are being given. Make sure you've got the right checks and balances in your procedures, what verification procedures you're going to involve, and is there any new or updated documentation that you have a look at? So think about all those procedural things. Your staff will need both to be communicated about this, they need to be told what's happening, why it's happening, and some training will be needed. So how are you going to communicate this to your staff? Now, what we found through the GIST pilot is, in general, teaching staff are positive about this, but not in a unanimous way. Some of them do have some significant concerns. Some of them really do not like the idea of this. And if you're going to um, implement this in your organisation, you need to bring along all your staff. Now, you might say it's an optional thing and you don't have to do it if you don't want to, or you might think because of all the positives around bias, around consistency, etc., you do want everybody doing this. And so there are very positive things to say. This will help reduce your workload. This will help you give more detailed feedback to students. Um, and that comment, does anyone going to teaching because they love marking students' work? I don't think that's one of the main reasons why anybody wants to be a teacher or an academic. And so if we can convince people this will reduce the amount of time you do spend doing that, I think that will for many people be a positive. But there will be concerns. People will be worried about, hang on, if you're reducing our workloads, might that have implications on our jobs, on deprofessionalising us? How accurate and reliable are these AI tools? So you need to think about how you're going to deal with those concerns. A good pilot is an important part of doing that. And finally, you need to think about some CPD. What are the training needs in order to implement this kind of approach? And how will you deliver that CPD? Covering both the technical sides of it and the non-technical side, getting the students to understand why, reassuring the students, understanding the benefits, etc. Moving on to the students, something that I feel very strongly about, and generally the guidance does suggest, is that it's very important that we have full transparency with students. I have come across, certainly one or two individual teachers who have been using the TeacherMatic tools and kind of doing it on the down low. And I don't think that is good practice at all. And you do need to communicate this to students and think about, how you're going to do this. Perhaps a video explaining it that goes out to students, some documentation. Do you do it through tutorial sessions? Is it done through the class teachers? And it is important that you sell this to the students and that they can see the benefits to them, because a common initial, students can be quite resistant to this sometimes. And one common reaction is, well, hang on, you're telling us we can't use AI to write our assignments, so what on earth are you doing grading the assignments with AI? So, you need to think about how to head that over. And, communicating those benefits, talking about how it can remove bias, how it can lead to fairer assessments, how teachers do get fatigue when they've got big workloads, and it makes, do you really want your to be that 80th one in the pile of 100 that's being assessed? That they will get more detailed feedback and that they will improve the turnaround speed. They'll get their assessments back to them quicker. And also, I didn't put it there, that the teacher is still involved, that the human is still in the loop. It's not AI only, it's AI supported. Permissions. Now, I just want to emphasise here, I'm not giving legal advice. I'm not a lawyer, but I've done some research into this, and I've spoken to a number of people in different universities and colleges. So, do you need permission to use AI in assessment? The consensus seems to be that you don't actually need permission, because as long as you're not feeding any large language models, and the colleges and universities have a right to process student work under public task and legitimate interest, which I gather have some kind of legal meetings. But I still think we should get student permissions. I would argue that very, very strongly. Do you do this in an opt-in or an opt-out way? And clearly there are benefits to both of those. And how and where do you do that? It could be an opt-in or opt-out box on an enrolment form. it could be on the learner agreement, on the student contract. An alternate way that I've come across in the last week is where it's a standard statement on every assignment brief template that the student, when they sign that this is their own work, they're also acknowledging that they understand that AI will be used as part of the grading and assessment tool. So there are different ways that you can do that, and my strong recommendation is that you are transparent and you do gain some way that the student is giving you permission to do this. Something that will reassure students is that there are appeals and complaints procedures in place. Section 22 of the GDPR Act says that all individuals have a right not to be subject to a decision made solely on automated processing. Again, the human in the loop removes that. But make sure that you've got appeals and complaint procedures that can deal with this AI in assessment. Think about how you're going to monitor and evaluate it. So over time, I think you're going to want to monitor what the staff attitudes are initially, and as things go on, the student attitudes, how accurate and reliable, compare AI grades with human grades, how well are the assessments working, and what are the impacts on workloads and turnaround time. And finally, we can, if you do want to go ahead with this, TeacherMatic can support you. So particularly for our customers, we can offer development days, the SAFE framework Esam will be talking about momentarily. We can do demonstrations. If you're not a customer, we can give you a free trial of these tools and help support you get going, and offer a range of CPD options. So if any of you do want to implement this and you want some support from us, we are putting together a range of packages to help out. And just email me about that. Okay, I'm going to now hand over to my colleague Esam, who's going to talk. Oh, Esam, are there any questions I need to deal with first, actually?
I've
Or they all been
answered.
dealt with?
I think I've answered most of them.
Oh, well done. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Okay, I will hand over to Esam now, and I will monitor the questions while Esam is talking.
All right. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation, Peter.
Yep, I can see it.
All right. Thank you, Peter, for that. And thank you all for joining us today. So over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to explore one of the biggest questions facing education right now. How do we use AI to support feedback and assessment responsibly? Because AI is already arriving in marking and feedback workflows across the sector. So the challenge now is whether it will be used and how we ensure it is used ethically, transparently, and with appropriate human oversight. So today I'm going to introduce the SAFE framework as a starting point for that dialogue and hopefully have a conversation across the sector about it. Please do bear in mind this is version 1, and Peter at the end of my segment is going to be sharing the SAFE framework, including a feedback form, and we would really appreciate your feedback about this version of our SAFE framework. And also we're going to be delivering a deep dive on the SAFE framework on the first Wednesday of June, and we're going to be sharing the sign up link for that. So just bear in mind it is a live document and we genuinely want your feedback, all right, to shape how this document develops. So let's be honest about where we are. AI tools are already being used in your institution by both students and staff, and often informally, often without a framework, and often without anyone really knowing how widespread it is. So this is not a future problem, it's already here. And the question isn't whether AI will be used in feedback and assessment, it's whether it will be used well. So why aren't institutions moving faster? Because there are genuine concerns. First of all, academic integrity, professional judgment, data protection, And these aren't just general worries. They reflect real risks that senior leaders and quality teams are right to take very, very seriously. So the challenge is that these concerns can become a reason to do nothing, which leaves staff and students navigating AI without any guidance at all. So what's needed is, I believe, a framework to proceed responsibly. So this is the reality many institutions are facing right now. Some staff are using AI to write feedback every day. I know I would have been one of them, by the way. Others refuse to touch it. Students get wildly inconsistent experiences. Quality teams don't know what to report. And institutions carry real risk they may not have mapped yet. So this isn't a technology problem, it's a governance and culture problem. And that's what exactly this framework is designed to address. So let me introduce you to the SAFE framework. SAFE stands for 4 principles that together provide a clear, practical governance structure for AI-supported feedback. Each principle maps to a real concern that institutions have and gives educators and leaders a shared language to talk about, AI use in assessment in a way that is responsible and defensible. So let's look at each of these acronyms. The first SAFE principle is about data, and that is often the very first question legal, compliance, and IT teams ask. Where does the student's work go when I submit it to a tool like TeacherMatic? Who can see it? Is it being used to train an AI model? Does it leave institutional control? These are exactly the right questions you should be asking. And SAFE institutions demand clear answers to all of them before any AI feedback tool is deployed. So TeacherMatic's advanced feedback generator is designed to meet these standards. Secure processing, no training on student data, and institutional control throughout. The second principle is about where authority sits. And the answer is clear. It's with you, the educator. AI should never independently determine a final grade. Any grade or summative judgment should always be reviewed, agreed, and appropriately scrutinized by a qualified educator. What it can do is take on the heavy lifting of drafting, producing structured, personalized feedback based on maybe a rubric, saving significant time. That draft then goes through human review before it reaches the student. This is the 80-20% model that we advocate for. AI does the groundwork, the educator does what only a human can do, which is the 20%, which is really important, which is to reflect on the feedback and refine it. So the third principle is fairness and inclusion. And fairness is often the principle that's overlooked when institutions rush to adopt AI. AI models are not neutral. They reflect the data they were trained on, and that can introduce bias, particularly around language, culture, and educational background. So SAFE institutions build in safeguards. Criteria anchored feedback helps here, but human review is absolutely essential. And educators need to be asking, does this feedback serve every student fairly? Used well, AI can actually improve consistency in feedback, but only if those safeguards are in place. The final principle is about honesty and accountability. If AI is involved in generating or structuring feedback, students should know about it. not because they need to fear it, but because transparency builds trust. The same applies internally. Institutions need a clear position on AI in assessment, a policy that staff and students can point to. Someone needs to own it, and that ownership should come with a commitment to review and improve over time. Ethical AI use in education isn't a one-time decision. It's an ongoing process and practice. So I want to stop here for a moment because this is the most important thing I will say today. AI generates, educators decide. It doesn't matter how good the AI output is. It doesn't matter how much time it saves. The moment an educator stops reviewing and approving feedback before it reaches a student, you have crossed a line here, a big red line. So human in the loop is not just a nice to have. It's the foundation that every other safe principle rests on. So how do institutions get started? The honest answer is carefully and incrementally. We recommend a three-stage approach. Start by exploring, identify where AI could genuinely add value, and make sure your data foundations are solid. Then run a structured trial with willing staff in a defined context. Learn from it, and only then scale with policy and training behind you. So this isn't about moving slowly, it's about moving sustainably. So here's what this looks like in practice. 5 steps. The educator is present in each of these steps. They provide the assessment brief and any supporting criteria or guidance available. The AI generates a structured draft. The educator reviews it, genuinely editing and applying their knowledge. The personalized feedback goes to the student, and then the educator and institution reflect on quality. Notice that the AI is only active at step 2. Step 1, 3, 4, and 5 are all educator-led, and that's by design. So what does this all mean practically for your institution? 3 things. First, a common language. AI governance fails when everyone is talking about different things. SAFE gives you the words. Second, a structure you can build policy around. Each principle is a governance question, and institutions can use the SAFE framework to self-assess and demonstrate responsible practice to both inspectors and accreditors. And third, reassurance for staff. The biggest barrier to responsible AI adoption in education isn't technology, it's anxiety. So this SAFE framework gives educators permission to engage with clarity about what responsible looks like. So before we finish, I really want to encourage you to explore the SAFE framework and help shape where this goes next. Peter has already posted the links in the chat pane. The first link is our deep dive in June next month, where I'm going to be doing a deep dive in more detail about the SAFE framework. We would love your feedback about this framework. So the second link is a Google feedback form. So please do give us feedback about that. And the last is the version 1 of the framework. And I'll just reiterate, the feedback link is incredibly important to us. We don't want this framework to be created in isolation. So if you are working in assessment, quality, teaching and learning, leadership, or AI strategy, your insights and experiences genuinely matter and will help us improve future versions. So please download the framework, share your feedback, and join us for our next deep dive. So with that being said, I want to thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Esam. And I'm going to hand over now to Hannah Lawrence from GISC.
Hello everyone. Yes, I'm from GISC. I'm a licensing manager in GISC. I can see a few people on this call might not be familiar with GISC, so just a quick overview of what we do. We're a not-for-profit charity. We have a number of services that we offer to our members. Our members are generally further education and higher education colleges in the UK and Ireland. So we one department within GISC is called the GISC AI team, and TeacherMatic have done a number of pilots with our AI team. And so what I mean by a pilot? They've worked with our AI team in a number of colleges and universities to look at the tool and how it works in those practical settings and publish the results of those pilots. And so the first pilot that was done with GISC and TeacherMatic was a further education pilot. The institutions involved in that, the further education institutions involved, got to trial the generative AI tools across 8 FE colleges. Staff use TeacherMatic for lesson planning, quizzes, schemes of work, and administrative tasks. The pilot, I believe, focused on saving teacher time and improving productivity and testing safe AI adoption in FE settings. That said, I know there's been a number of questions about time saving today, and so there is have taken a look over that pilot outcome might be significantly interesting for you. The next pilot that was done was a higher education pilot. So the FE pilot expanded into 7 universities to explore how academics could use TeacherMatic in higher education, teaching and learning settings. Participants tested the AI-assisted content creation, I believe, and curriculum design to support student workflows. And again, that is a published report that you can access through the GISC website. And then there's a current pilot that's ongoing at the minute with TeacherMatic and GISC. That's an AI assessment and feedback pilot, and it therefore has a focus on assessment, where the other two not so much. And hopefully the results will be published for that shortly. And yeah, so I also just wanted to show you, let me just share my screen, I won't be a second. So the GISC software licensing arm has a website where our members can purchase licensing agreements that we've negotiated on behalf of the sector. And TeacherMatic we have an agreement with, which is fantastic news. I just want to go through how you can take a look at the offer. So here we go, you just search TeacherMatic. There are 2 different tiles that you can enter. So TeacherMatic, those institutions already purchasing TeacherMatic directly can enter this tile, but I'll take you through to the tile for new subscribers. So the benefits of the agreement via GISC and TeacherMatic, it's guaranteed lowest pricing available to higher education and further education. There is a 10% multi-year discount on purchases. Multi-year purchases are protected from any year-on-year price increases due to inflation. And so here we go. If you just look in products and pricing, you can see that there are different lengths of commitment, with the longer commitments becoming cheaper. It's also important to note that this is not per student pricing, this is per teacher pricing, which is extremely attractive as an agreement, as more and more agreements are becoming per FTE or student user purchases. This is per teacher. Yeah, so I don't think I can message the chat, but if it would be great if Esam or Peter could put the link to the chess website and also my email address in the chat should you like any more information on the agreement via GISC. And I think that's all from me.
Thank you very much, Hannah. So we've actually unusually finished a little bit ahead of time. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming. Your time is hugely appreciated. We know how busy you are, and hope to see you at a future webinar.